Nachos Amigos, and welcome to Record Breakers, a music podcast where a group of friends gather together to share music with each other, an album at a time. It's like a little book club for music. It's a good time had by all. I'm Petey Rave, and more of a past punk, more than a guy, but I'm open to all things. Here with me is my team, my squad, my crew, my quorum. We've got David.
Hi, I'm David, and Future Funk is my musical midlife crisis.
Mm-hmm. We've got Matt.
I'll let you know when I hit my midlife crisis.
Mm-hmm. And we've got Brett.
It's something present day pop. I'm more. You took my pee, Petey. You took my pee.
It is in his name.
Yeah,
I guess. My witty little quip.
I took your
all
pee.
These notes,
kind
I'll
of
just
now,
delete, backspace. You know.
I took your pee, and now I will take it off and test it.
Flip that
for your
Twitch
random
homies.
drug test.
Can you flip that?
Don't tell my employer, Petey.
We're here to talk about
eBay.
Music. Yeah. We're here to talk about music. We're talking about an album, and the provider of the album this week is David. David, what have you brought for the group this week?
I have brought for the Record Breakers podcast, crew and fans, the 2017 album from Russia-based future funk artist Desired, and the album is entitled Lovestory.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about expectations. Brett, what were your expectations coming into this album?
I mean, coming in, I had no idea what this was, but then when I heard some of it, I was like, oh, but where do I know any of this from? And I don't have the answer to that. But having heard some of it, I did recognize. But no, on paper, I had no idea what this was.
Mm-hmm. Matt, what expectations did you have coming into this album?
None really. I mean, knowing David, it could be any number of things, and it certainly was related to something that he's brought before, I think, but there's really no telling with David.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I got an inkling of what this would be, and I was wondering exactly what we were getting, and just some hints here and there from the idea that he did mention it was future funk. So I was anticipating, but definitely did not know who the artist was, and I only slightly know more about who the artist is now, because I think that there's not much info on the Bandcamp. But yeah, I'm looking forward to talk about what we actually experienced. David, how would you describe this album musically? What would be the themes and elements?
Just for a quick primer for everybody, not to go full Pat Chennington on this one. Future funk. Future funk is the genre of electronic music that has come into prominence, say, in the last 5 years or so. If you're familiar with the vaporwave movement, future funk is sort of an offshoot of vaporwave. Whereas with a lot of vaporwave music, you'll hear a lot of 80s synthwave and pop music. Future funk often leans more towards the world of funk and soul and R&B from the 80s and early 90s, and even dipping back into the 70s. And also, where it really leans into the Japanese aesthetic, which is a little bit different from the vaporwave side of things, is that they also take a lot from the city pop genre that was really popular in Japan through the 80s. If you're into the anime, a lot of the music and themes from the 80s and early 90s is very much of that genre, city pop. It's very much of the time of the economic boom in Japan, and it's a very specific type of genre of pop music that was popular there. Also, one of the maybe the biggest influential act of the future funk genre is Daft Punk. The heavy influence of French house and disco comes all over in future funk if you just even any artist, any future funk artist. And there is an emphasis that is different from vaporwave. There is an emphasis on groove. There's an emphasis on visual cues to anime, and the word anime disco. That is the term that's often thrown around. And there is sampling that can be up for discussion depending on how you feel about it. But sampling is there. And this is an album from Desired, who's one of the more well-known future funk artists, part of the Sailor team. Ironically, it is 5 artists that all use Sailor Moon aesthetics because there's 5 of them. And he's one of the more well-known artists in the future funk genre. And there is one particular song on here that went a little bit viral. And I thought that the entire album was one to talk about.
And city pop is a sound that's seeing some prominence, especially in like a couple things in K-pop, or a couple artists are exploring that in K-pop, and it's like seeing a little bit of a resurgence, which is really cool. Brett, how would you describe this album musically?
I mean, it's future funk. This is a lot of dance music with disco beats, orchestral horns and strings doing their hits, and it's got a lot of turn of the '90s pop music tones. There's a lot more modern of the electronic beats are of a quality and of a production type that did not exist at the time that they are pulling from. So there's a little bit of that going on in the mixing. So you'll get some like artistically used, purposeful, like artifacting, judder, cassette tape warble, other sounds like that, low fidelity. Sometimes there's an emphasis of extremely like the bass is so bassy that it like almost ducks everything else out as an effect. There's some stereo effects that go along with it, but it's very much, you're gonna hear tones that go through the 80s, but they're generally gonna be with a disco beat in the background, and you'll hear like strings and like horns done in the way of like that 70s Japanese jazz that if you've ever watched a Lupin III, you might be familiar with the way that that was a French and Japanese production. So like it had a little bit of the European jazz tone. But I actually looked that up earlier. I was like, so how much of the influence how much of my knowledge of disco orchestra music was brought by watching anime from the 70s, and how much of it is actually knowledge that I have? And I don't know, but let's just say there was a time when I was listening to all kinds of like 70s era like Godzilla soundtracks, and there's some of that influence that I think is being touched on. Either that or they both are influenced by the same thing.
Matt, how would you describe this album musically?
It definitely had a very modern feel to me. Especially the throbbing compression kind of brought it really modern. At least purposefully when it's purposeful. They did some playing with the EQ, which was kind of neat. If not a little nauseating, and I don't mean that in a bad way per se, but this whole album kind of made me feel dizzy and disoriented.
I have it in my notes. It is totally like there is an uncomfortable feeling especially with my in-ears in, and just like the pressure.
I was listening to this the first time on my way to a rehearsal.
Like on speakers, right?
I listened on speakers the first time, and I was on my way to a rehearsal in my car, and I thought, do I need to either stop this or pull over? Because it was weird how literally dizzy it made me feel.
that fake like it sounded like audio ducks because the bass is hitting. So that made me feel like somebody had hit a hammer, and I was like slightly like my ears were ringing slightly, like that feeling.
That combined with the EQ shifting like a bandpass up and down.
Yeah,
it was really cool.
Pushing that slider,
no doubt about it. But it was a lot, and lots of sampling. I assume I can't imagine that they would have
they got Billy
any
Crystal
of
and
that.
Meg Ryan in the studio.
Yeah. Although the thing I just kept thinking over and over was, there's no way any of this is licensed, right?
No, I guarantee they did not pay for
it. I know. I feel like we shouldn't
when
even
Larry
be doing
met
this album.
Judy.
This is like when you get into girl talk. Just don't think about it. Just enjoy the ride.
Okay. Yeah. Also, lots of digital glitches, which were
weird ones too.
Yeah.
Like there's like one effect that's like a record that's just being turned back and then turned forward back to the exact point that it like scratch started.
Yeah.
And there was another one that made me wonder, oh dang it, is my audio interface buffer overflowing again? And then I need to stop playing for a second. Oh no, that's just the track. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
No, it's doing that. It's doing that.
It's doing that.
It does it more than I would like.
Yeah. I think
I blame Windows 10.
Yeah. A lot of things you can blame Windows 10 on. Yeah. This album is a fun like mental exercise. It is cool. It is that future funk sound. There's like a lot of fun horns, a lot of fun sampling, a lot of fun like using like the vocals of like old tracks, and like I think the feel of it that I got, that it feels in some ways like the execution of it, and have it in my notes, it feels like the 80s section of a DJ set, like but a DJ that isn't just like not just like a wedding DJ who's just playing CDs, but like somebody who's crafting beats and crafting sounds, but using songs, but still playing like songs, because that's how you're still hired to make people have a good time, and people like songs they know. That's why nobody listens to our podcast. But like it's like, it feels like, it's like, all right, here you get that sampling of that song, but with like its own production over it and stuff like that. But it feels like that, but for these songs that may not like these particular section songs, and it's like the 80s set, and or the disco set or things like that, and it definitely feels like a DJ performance, and I like it. Like that's what's the strength of it. It's definitely kind of has like, it does well with the samples, and the horns are fun. Like the horn samples are fun, and like, and they're executed pretty well, and they're like mixed in there really well, and it has a nice like, it has a consistency but a nice like diverse like feel of like sounds and styles. But let's get into some of the different songs. David, what would be some of the key tracks to zeroing in on for you?
For me, the second track, Don't Stop. The big horns on the hook, and it has a really great funky guitar line as well. And one thing I like about future funk is that it really doesn't waste time. It gets you into the hook and gets you moving, and you're not allowed to take a break, and I dig that. Track 4, In Love. It really kicks into another gear at 1 minute and 25 seconds, and you hear a bass guitar that lets you know that we're done screwing around, so you better be ready to jam. Broken Heart. I think this is the song that got the most carry amongst the scene. It's got a really strong pumping drum underneath a synth line that's really impossible to ignore. And the chorus is one that if it doesn't get stuck in your head, then teach me your secrets, O wise one, because you have mastered the universe and I need to know. Also, I'm So Alone had some really amusing 80s tom drums that gave me a little bit of that kind of almost Phil Collins sound that I appreciate, at least.
Brett, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
All I Need. I like the retro pop beat and the instruments. The bass it hit. That was the bass that first gave me the weird feeling. It's the one that probably stands out the most with like that weird ducking effect. In Love, that's the one that has that weird scratch-like effect where it goes forward and backward, but like very, very like, yeah, it was something I had never ever heard before. I'm pretty sure I'm familiar with that song from somewhere else. Excuses, that's where Billy and Meg show up for a little bit. I like, for some reason, one of the VHSs that lived in my house when I was growing up is When Harry Met Sally. So like and I haven't seen that movie in probably 30 years. So like hearing that was put me in a place. Broken Heart, was that Sailor Moon sounds that I was hearing? Yes. It was? Yes. Okay. I did not know, and the information about this album was a little sparse. But the 80s guitar solo, I was into that, and it made me look up Steve Lukather videos, which you guys got a little bit of earlier today in the Slack. I'm So Alone, digital beats under like a Lupin the Third-esque 70s era disco jazz fusion. That's cool. It had a very solid hook. And Sunshine Aerobics at the 34-second mark. There's an audible merp. I whether or not I enjoyed it isn't the thing. I heard it every single time it went through, and I will never not hear it. So yeah, merp.
I just heard it.
Merp. Yeah,
merp. Yeah. Matt, what would be some of the key tracks for you?
Sunshine Aerobics. It's the first track on the album, and it was the first track for me to. When I put it on, I thought, am I going to have to switch to something else? Because it just made me feel super weird. And it took me until the third or fourth listen through this album for any of the tracks to stop doing that and stop making me feel like I need to lie down.
I'm going to have to listen back to this. I'm sorry, Matt. I didn't expect this.
I didn't either.
I apologize.
It's okay.
But it's effective.
It was just, yeah. I don't even know what it is. I don't get motion sick or anything like that. There was just something about it that made me feel the same way. It just made me feel a little lightheaded. or made me feel similarly to how I feel when I'm lightheaded, if you will.
Yeah.
Excuses, again, nice Billy Crystal sample. That it was kind of it catches your attention because I don't usually expect to hear movie dialogue from a movie I haven't even watched, but I've listened to a Justin Robert Young podcast episode about it at the beginning of a song. And this was the one that had the digital glitching that sounded like my interface buffer overflowing, and so that was fun. But it also happened on my iPhone, so there's that.
Yeah.
And I'm So Alone. This one, it had a descending line, which it's a super common chord progression, but it reminded me for whatever reason of maybe a Renaissance or Baroque tune. I don't know which one it was. But the melody of the descending chords. I meant to send it to a friend of mine who is more well versed in that style of music, and he may have been able to tell me, oh yeah, that's so and
That's
so
a
by
classic Crumhorn lick.
exactly.
The hurdy-gurdies played that all the time.
Mm-hmm.
That gets it.
Yeah, like the horns on "Don't Stop" are fantastic, as was said. They're just like infectious. And yeah, the guitar work is really nice. Yeah, the DJ scratch on "In Love," that like like
It's way more accurate than any human could do.
yeah, like
It starts and stops at the same spot, but it's great.
yeah, and it's just a fun moment. I mean, the only other way a human could do it was to be like, yeah, no, like even like if you put a tape, like you have to, like how you would do it as a DJ, but or if you had the digital like one version of the turntable, but it's pretty fantastic. I'm So Alone, once again, the horn melody is just like that like you know the funky disco horn melody is just beautiful. And Never Fall in Love Again, I like that, like the Japanese pop, but like particularly the Japanese like folky pop, or like the old people pop. like I don't know if that's how like it feels like they sampled a song that probably old Japanese people listen to, like but like in the middle of that, in the core center of like this whole like future funk sandwich around it, and I like that. I like the style of that. It was a fun experience. These are just some of the memorable moments. Like a lot of the songs have memorable moments, but those are like those stood out. Let's bring it back around the horn. Talk about some conclusive thoughts. Brett, what would be your conclusion on this album as a whole?
I mean, this album does this style of music very well. It's very, very catchy. The hooks are good. The quality is really good. And it was I enjoyed my time with it. I heard things that were new that I'd never heard before, but like it's really not something that I'm going to probably listen to a ton. But like I wasn't like, if I need something to put on that doesn't have a ton of in my face vocals, and it's a nice little short package. So, it's a good time to like give it a shot and give it a listen. There's nothing offensive on this unless you get like the weird inner ear like monster that but like, I'm going to have to go back and figure out exactly what it is. I'm going to do the science, lock myself in a room for a week and figure out what ooh makes me feel like I was swimmy. But it was interesting. This was a fun time. There were much more difficult albums to squeeze a review out of than this one.
Yeah. Matt, what would be your conclusion on this album as a whole?
I didn't mind it. I wasn't crazy about it. It's not particularly my style. It did grow on me. It was fun to listen for samples, like you're listening and I think, is that from Billie Jean? I'm not sure. It might be, but it's also just it's not that hard to recreate that riff or something like it. Much like it's not super hard to write a song that sounds a lot like Peg, though it's legally distinct.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's fine for the background. And if you listen to it closely, there's stuff to get out of it, like burp.
Yeah.
You gotta find your merp. You gotta locate
Middle Earth role playing game.
Exactly.
Is Merp the sproing? Is Merp sproing?
It was my sproing.
Exactly.
Added to the list in the wiki.
Hashtag Merp is sproing.
Exactly. Yeah, I think the takeaway, my conclusion would be that this is just a fun album to kind of like just put on your headphones and like swim in. and like depending on the kind of headphones, depending on your or what was it? I was let's say complexion. Your
Yes.
I mean,
you're
not wrong. Don't have to say it out loud.
I didn't say that, everybody. That was not David. That
your constitution.
Future funk.
Yes.
Future funk is for everyone.
Depending on who you are, it may make you roll a constitution check, but just know the DC is not super high. It just sometimes you roll low.
Yeah.
But so it may
be fair. I never had to actually lie down or turn it off.
Exactly.
But the thought did cross my mind.
Yes.
Did you consider shaking what your mama gave you, Matt, instead?
No. Maybe that's the issue.
Yes.
Yeah.
It could be the antidote right there. This is like I said, you can swim in, kind of like get nice and lost in it. It's fun. It has that fun retro style and very hashtag aesthetic. In a really great way. It has it makes you feel like you're in a Sailor Moon dance party, man. And
I'm in a sailor mood.
Yes.
Hey.
Hashtag Sailor Mood. Yeah, and I think it works to its favor. It is a cool experience, and I think especially if you're really into like the retro wave, future funk, that whole milieu, and in particular future funk, this is a shining example. It is a very good one of those, which is really fantastic.
Cut. Like
It is.
Exactly.
Pedro,
Yes. I'm here. Everybody else froze for a hot second.
we were able to communicate
back.
with one another, but now, hey, we're back on Twitch.
Hey,
we were.
how about that? Oh.
We lost David for a hot second.
Oh no.
I was just like,
Is there some kind of a hack going on right now?
It's the dizziness from the album. It's permeated the internet.
reconnecting.
Oh,
Oh,
DG
no.
just blue screened. Oh no.
So
How
I
did that
think-
kill Petey? And how was he able to talk?
Oh, what?
What?
Oh.
Oh,
Finish the show, Petey. Take it home.
I'm like echoing from you somehow.
Yeah. Can you plug your headphones into
Caller?
your phone?
Caller, turn off the phone. Turn off
Also,
the
you're
radio.
2/3 of the screen over there, and it's great.
Going great, everyone.
I love it.
That being said,
Still a great night.
David, are you there?
David is typing. That's not gonna work.
Oh, it would have been fun. It was like that like harken it back to that time, that Fanny Pack episode where David's power went out. Luckily, we're basically done with the episode, and we just did kind of like brought it home. But like, what was that episode? It was.
Deej could bring his text to his text of his haiku, and we can have a vocoder read it in a British accent.
My vertical
Robo-
monitor has been having weird lines, and I don't know if it's the driver or the monitor,
There you go.
and I don't know which I would prefer.
All right.
All right.
What do you
All
remember?
right.
Before we start, do you remember which episode was the one where you lost power in the middle of it?
Oh, it was a fanny pack with Drew and Kaz. That much I remember.
Yeah. I just wish I remember which one it was.
And then
yeah.
I just had my phone by me, which is like, fuck it, let's go. Finish the show.
Yeah.
Because
it
we
was
were
like-
pretty close to the end.
yeah. All we had to do was bring it home. So I was like, all right, screw it. Let's just finish it. So what's this fun? Didn't we do an episode with you on the floor of a con?
Yes.
This is like, was it? I think it was no, was it? Was it? No, not Colossal Con. Was it?
It might have
Was
been
it Ace?
Yomicon.
Or Yomicon, yeah.
Yeah.
Or Asen or Yomicon, one of those. All right. That being said, okay. Woof, we're back. David, now we go to you. What are your conclusive thoughts? What's your conclusion on this album as a whole?
I will say that I'm rather surprised that all of you said that this is like a headphone album, because I find this to be very much an album that you play loud in a big room. I think the points
too.
about
I think it cut out before. I did both. Yeah, I
Okay.
definitely agree.
I think that the points you made about this being great for DJs to throw into their sets and have things to produce and show off is absolutely valid, because that's a big part of Future Funk, because a lot of them are DJs by trade. A lot of them incorporate a lot of regular dance tracks along with their remixes as well. I think that right now, I loved that you guys said Sailor Moon Dance Party, because this is definitely something for the anime kids to get up and shake their booties to. I think that Future Funk has a place right now, and I think that this album had a bunch of songs that would go well on your playlist when you're just sitting at your computer and you want something to bounce to a little bit. I think individually, Desired has better sensibilities, and he leans more into the city pop size of things. And I think his knack for sampling really helps him stand out. This is a standout Future Funk album from the Future Funk albums that I'm aware of and artists that I know. And I think it's a pretty good complete package.
It's a total package.
I will say, for what it's worth, that I rarely listen to anything over speakers in my current listening situation, just because it's not convenient.
Automotive listening is the exception for me as well.
Yeah.
I will listen.
Until I get around to getting a what I hope to at some point, maybe even it has to be when I move to a new place, a bookshelf stereo music listening setup.
Bust out the Sansui.
I do have some floor standing speakers in my garage that I hope have not disintegrated yet.
Yeah, you can make some speakers last a long time, as long as you give them some tender love and care.
I already replaced the foam ring around the woofers.
Just don't poke the tweeter.
Mm-hmm.
PD, we're on Twitch.
I was listening
God
to Parliament
sakes.
on them.
Oh yeah,
And-
and they funkadelic.
Yeah, on the one of the songs, the woofer hit, and I definitely saw a piece of that foam fly out of the speaker, and I thought, okay, it might be time to fix this before it's can no longer be repaired.
Yes.
Destructive funk.
That's
Yes.
right.
Make my funk the defunk.
There's nothing more deflating than somebody on those floor standing, at least the ones that have the exposed tweeter, seeing somebody poke one. It's like, fuck you. We have I can only imagine the where I work, in the fancy area, the fancy area, we have Bowers and Wilkins speakers. You know, the stuff, the Diamond series, not the Nautilus. They're not going to bring the Nautilus into the store, but the Diamond series with the Continuum. I guess now, I think they call it.
This sounds very techy.
It's very like old speaker stuff, but yeah, the Diamond series speakers, and yeah, they have the tweeters with like the little dome, and if somebody wanted to, they could poke that thing. It's like they've just ruined the tweeter on a $20,000 speaker. like oh my god. That being said, I wonder what this album sounds like on some like fucking Diamond series Powers and Wilkins or Martin Logan fucking.
I wonder what this album sounds like through a Teddy Ruxpin, because it was released on cassette tape and you could have put it in them.
Yeah.
Yes, you can.
Yes. So both of those things. On a pair of electromagnetics, listening to some future funk on electromagnetic speakers. Hell yeah. Yeah, those are our thoughts on Desired, Lovestory. Now we get to the main event of the evening. We get to the moment we've all been waiting for, our haiku reviews, where we sum it all up in poetic form with the 575s. Let's get down to the nitty gritty. Haiku numero uno. Brett, what is your haiku?
Solid one of these. Future funk from the near past has grooves aplenty.
Matt, what is your haiku?
Lots of funky grooves. A dizzying sensation. Likely won't return.
I don't know what possessed me to
From that trip that it's going to send you on.
Yeah.
You'll be lost forever.
Yeah, brother.
You'll be stuck in the funky anime space with me.
You'll jump in your spaceship Rosinante and fly into a black hole and end up in Olympus.
Exactly.
They will call you Cygnus, the god of balance.
Yep. All right, my haiku. A retro mind trip with some great danceable beats and fun aesthetic. And lastly, David, what is your haiku?
His knack for good clips puts this future funk album above the others.
Yeah, those are our thoughts on Desired's Lovestory. You can of course find this album on our Spotify playlist. Play Record Breakers, the home game. Do your due diligence and your due diligence. You can listen along at home. You can find the link to our Spotify playlist on the show notes, whether it's on the website or in the notes of your podcaster of choice, podcast catcher of choice. They typically will pull those notes, and you'll be able to click the link right there. But yeah, on that Spotify playlist will be next week's record, and it's going to be provided by Brett. Brett, what have you got for us next week?
Ooh, this was a hard one because I was going to bring you something to give you a certain flavor, and I couldn't pick which one. And then I found out that this thing existed that I did not know. So like, what happened? You think it's neat, like if you get an album that has Yngwie and Dio's keyboardsman? Yeah.
Okay.
What about his brother along with it, who was also a drummer for Rising Force, Yngwie Malmsteen's?
Mm-hmm.
Well, now what if you dropped Alan Holdsworth and they did a compilation album in 1996 where it is called Heavy Machinery, the studio album from Alan Holdsworth, Anders Johansson, and Jens Johansson?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I love Heavy Machinery.
Down with that.
Otis is great.
I enjoy the work of Jens Johansson.
Expect something a little. If you know who any of these people are,
there's some widdly, folks. There's going to be
some stuff. It's a keyboard. It's a drums. And it's Alan Holdsworth with his guitar and syntax.
Yes.
Be ready for the widdly.
I look forward to that, as you all should. But that'll be next week, and this is this week. And you can, of course, find us all over the internet. David is at Call Me DJM. Brett is at Hibbity HIBBITYBIBBARD. Matt is at MReddickW. I'm at PD Rave. The show's at 4 Record Breakers. That's the number 4 Record Breakers, not 5 like the hand
you're
over
getting
here.
false information.
Yeah, not that number that the hand on the album cover is showing, but 4, like the Horseman. 4 Record Breakers. RecordBreakersPodcast.com. RecordBreakersPodcast@gmail.com is the email. If you want to email us some feedback, some what you thought about the album, or you can comment on the website, on the show, on YouTube. Find us everywhere you find podcasts: Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, bunch of different places. Everywhere that'll accept my RSS feed. Rebelli.net for listening to the shows. Rebelli TV on YouTube and on Twitch. Follow along. Help me get some fellow milestones if you can. Give us a subscription and
Give
like.
PD
share.
Rave some poggers.
Yeah, like, share, subscribe, do all the things. Until next time, hasta los huevos.
Toodaloo.
Hashtag find Luke.
Rebelli Podcast, baby.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.